I'm in. You keep going.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our special program today. You know, to review and look at considerations and protocols to help get our young people ready to play when that day comes. And working together, we're going to do it. We have to remember first all the people that we've lost, and we'll never forget those days, those dark days. But we're here today to recover and to rebuild. And we're reaching out for that day that we can build all these beautiful children and beautiful teams and build a beautiful city of Section 8 Nassau County sports again. And we're mending slowly, you know, brick by brick, day by day. And each heart, each child, their heart, day by day, helping them to recover and be ready for the day when we can play again. It'll take hard work together, but it's also going to be kindness, humility, and courage to work together to build this back. And I want to thank Oceanside and Dr. Harrington and for this special song that we had on our website that's really part of all of Nassau County, because all of you that are here today, you are a ray of hope.
Share the screen again, Frank.
Yep, I got it.
There you go.
Out of the ruins and rubble, out of the smoke, out of a night of struggle, can we see a ray of hope? One pale thin ray, reaching for the day we can build a beautiful city. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can build a beautiful city, not a city of angels, but we can build a city of men.
That's good.
So thank you guys, and that's what our story is today. That's our mission today. And the first, I'd like to share with you our basic plan is that we're going to have. We're so fortunate to have Dr. Robert Zayas from New York State Public High School Athletic Association, Executive Director. We also are very blessed to have Dr. Ackerman, Lenox Orthopedic Surgeon, and Jeff Corben, Dr. Corben, sports medicine specialist and physical therapist. Great presentation to help us get ready. But before we go on, I just have to say, when you talk about people building a city of hope and a city of belief, there's no one in my life that I've ever met that cares more than Pat Pizzarelli and Dom Vulpis. We are so lucky to have these two great men lead us. Pat has been an advocate and a supporter of all things for young people, and he was a major part in saying, Frank, go for this. Let's go for it. We can do this. Let's go for it. And Dom, yeah, Frank, we're going to do this. We'll get it done. These are two of the most remarkable, wonderful people leading Section 8 in athletics. We are in good hands. We have great role models, great leaders who care about our kids and care about all of us. And we're going to work together to build this city back, to build it back. I'd also like to thank Dr. Harrington, who gave me the okay to go do this, working with Pat and also Hank Grisham for his support of this. He is also a wonderful leader with Dr. Harrington and the other superintendents. I'd also like to thank my athletic director, Jeff Reisner, and my principal, Dr. Brendan Mitchell, for his support, and Dr. DeRosa and Diane Pavito, assistant superintendents, who were instrumental in that film, on that video, short video. Last, I'd like to really give a shout out, special thanks for their support. Jimmy Amon in the beginning days, and Matt McLeese, and Kevin Carbonetti, our my assistant principal here, and also Tony Chiaz and Dominick. Tony at Oceanside, and Dom at Plainview. All people that gave us support that you can do this. We can do this. And now I'd like to call and ask Executive Director of Section 8 Athletics, a dear friend and the best leader, the best person to introduce our first speaker, Pat Pizzarelli.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And I'd like to welcome, first of all, everyone who is on this call today, on this Zoom meeting. We have athletic administrators, we have coaches, we have teachers, we have Dr. Harrington, of course, our superintendent. We have our guest speakers, who I'd like to thank personally for taking the time to, with us today to help us, get ready, get our athletes back on the field. For us, that's the most important thing. As most of you know, I'm probably the most hated guy in Nassau County. I could just show you the 300 or so emails I have to say that. But most of you know me, or you who do know me, I want to get those kids on the field yesterday, but we want to get them back on the field safely. And that's what today's about. So speakers, thank you for sharing us your time and your expertise today. We also have Kevin Marr from News 12 and Greg Sarah, two supporters from Newsday, two supporters of high school athletics on Long Island. So they've joined us today. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. He's been in that role for the last 9 years. Before that, he worked as an assistant in the New Mexico Association. And he's actually grew up in Texas, but he's now a New Yorker, not born, but bred in New York here now. So Dr. Zayas, take it away.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I have quite a few slides to go through, and I just wanted to first start off by saying that these are very uncertain times, and I think everybody understands just how uncertain they are. And I appreciate the participation this afternoon because it continues to show the passion and enthusiasm that our coaches, athletic directors, and school administrators have for interscholastic athletics. Over the course of the last 7 months, a lot has transpired. And I have a few slides to go through to share with you today. And these are based upon the questions that have been submitted as you registered. So as we go through the questions, if you have additional questions, put them in the chat option within the Zoom call, and then we'll try to answer those the best that we can. At the very end of the presentation, I'll provide you with my contact information, my cell phone number, and my email address. If you have questions that maybe I didn't address or concerns that you have, we can certainly schedule some time to go ahead and address those when it's convenient for you. So as Pat said, I'm starting my 9th year here as the Executive Director at the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, and this is certainly the most challenging time. On September the 4th, and then again on September the 11th, we released on our website a resource document that really pertains to all things COVID related as it pertains to interscholastic athletics for our State High School Athletic Association. We work on behalf of about 800 schools and about 600,000 student athletes. And as Pat just said, we too want to do everything we possibly can to get students to return to the field of play. Right now, we do have 7 of our 11 sections that are participating. And I continue to stress, there are a lot of schools and there's some sections that right now it's not feasible, and that's okay. But we as the High School Athletic Association want to be here as a resource when all sections and all schools feel that it is able, or they are able, to provide interscholastic athletic participation opportunities for students. If you haven't seen this document on our website, if you go to our website and just click on the COVID tab all the way to the right-hand side, you'll see all things that we have released, press releases, any resources that we have, any guidance documents that we've created. But the most important one is right up here at the top of the page, the Return to Interscholastic Athletics resource document. And I'll reference this a few times as I address some of the questions that you have asked. So first and foremost, getting a lot of questions about what's the latest on the winter sports season? When can we start? When can we practice? Can we schedule games? What should we be telling our parents? All of those answers will come with additional guidance from our state officials. And I want to stress the fact that we are communicating with our state officials. But I feel like sometimes people want answers yesterday, or they want answers a week ago. And unfortunately, this is not the type of situation where we're getting immediate answers. We have to understand where we fall as interscholastic athletics and high school sports on the hierarchy of need. And I've been using this a lot, is that there is a hierarchy of need and there's a priority list. Just like there is a priority list in your school districts, in your departments, there's a priority list at the state Department of Health. There's a priority list at the governor's office. There's a priority list at the state education department. And as much as maybe we want high school sports to be at the top of that priority list, we also have to be realistic and understand that there is a hierarchy of need. And hospitalizations, infection rates, vulnerable population, educating the students in the classroom, getting those students to and from schools, the potential distribution of vaccines, those are all things that our state officials are actively working on right now. So sometimes I just try to remind our athletic directors who feel like we should have gotten answers a month ago to be reminded of the fact that we have to be patient. And I know that's not a good feeling because we all like schedules, we all like consistency, especially in the world of high school sports. We like knowing who we're gonna play and when we're gonna play them and who the officials are gonna be. But unfortunately, these are uncertain times and it's just not possible at this point in time. So the first question, when is the latest we'll be notified about the status of high school sports? We were listening in on a press conference about 3 weeks ago that Governor Cuomo had, and a media reporter from Syracuse asked the question about when are we going to get additional guidance on winter sports? And one of the members of the governor's staff mentioned that we would be receiving additional guidance at the beginning of November. So that's what we're going on right now. We're trying to be patient, trying to be cognizant. There's a lot going on. And so we're anticipating some additional guidance on the winter sports season at the beginning of November. So it could be tomorrow, it could be mid-November, but right now that's what we're going off of, that we have information from the governor's office via the press conference that we'll be receiving some additional guidance at the beginning of November. The next question, what if we do not move forward with the condensed schedule? What will be done to support our coaches and athletes? Is there a timeline in place for changes to be made? I think the best way to answer that question is we have to be willing to pivot and be flexible and amend and revise and modify our decisions in the best interest of student athletes. It's very difficult to sit here at the beginning of November and say, this is exactly what we're gonna do if X, Y, and Z occur. Because in this situation, that's no longer possible. We have to realize how quickly things are changing, how infection rates are going up, how infection rates are going down, how clusters are occurring throughout the state, and how hotspots are also occurring, and the impact upon our school districts. So to be able to give a definitive answer as far as what the decision will be if or when something does occur is very challenging. And I think that's one of the things, another thing that I've been trying to convey to our membership is there's a lot of problems and there's a lot of challenges and obstacles. And we can address those challenges and obstacles as the information becomes readily available. But my fear is by trying to get too far out in front of that problem or challenge, we turn that into a disaster, and it's not going to be beneficial for student athletes. So that's the reason why you see, at least from our office here at the State High School Athletic Association, we're trying to take the information as it becomes available from our state officials, and then we make decisions based upon that readily available information. The last question on this slide, when are we getting guidance on winter sports? When are we going to find out about winter sports? Again, the beginning of November is what we have been told by our state officials. This is a document that was included in August 25th guidance from the New York State Department of Health. And this is important because this really, the area in the blue highlights what we can anticipate for low and moderate risk sports that were given approval to start practice and play on September 21st. And then within the blue area, it does reference the fact that high risk sports, and the high risk sports are determined by the Department of Health. Pat Pizzarelli, Don Vulpis, myself did not sit down and create a risk assessment of sports. That was done by the Department of Health. And to their credit, they have been very consistent in that risk assessment since mid-June when they came out with the guidance for youth sports to start on July 6th. So what this area in the blue says is low and moderate risk sports can start practice and play on September 21st. And again, that's contingent upon the sections and schools determining it to be feasible in that area of the state. And then high risk sports were limited to practice only. with additional guidance, as it says here, would be given prior to December 31st. So with that being said, that's the reason why we as the High School Athletic Association took it upon ourselves and said, we don't think it's appropriate to ask football and volleyball players and competitive cheerleaders in the fall to practice for 8 to 10 weeks with really no hope of being able to participate in the game. What's in the best interest of our student athletes is the question that I continue to ask. And when we came to that conclusion that really we were looking at having students practice and not having a great opportunity to participate in games is the reason why we moved those fall high-risk sports to what we refer to as fall sports season 2 to begin on March 1st. Again, I'm being asked these questions on a daily basis. What can they do for high-risk sports? When can their seasons start? Can we develop a schedule? Should we develop a schedule? How many games are they going to be able to play? This is all contingent upon the guidance that we receive from our state officials. And again, we're anticipating that in the next few weeks. How will this work for schools with cohorts is another question that I'm getting an awful lot of. Keep in mind that if you have cohorts that our school districts do, you can still maintain those cohorts during a practice session. For example, right now we have 7 of our 11 sections participating in the sport of soccer or field hockey. If they have cohorts during the day, those student athletes can come out to practice. They can still be placed in their cohorts for the practice time. So if you have a 2-hour practice, those student athletes can arrive at practice, by their cohort, put their bags and water bottles in a specific area. By cohort, they can stretch together. By cohort, they can go ahead and do conditioning together and skill development. And potentially for the last 30 minutes of practice, then you bring all the cohorts together and they're participating in a scrimmage-like contest or game setting. Well, what you've done is you've drastically reduced the amount of time that those student athletes are together. And again, maintaining that cohort at the practice time for the majority of the practice session. Next question. Are there going to be any testing sites to ensure kids are negative before the season starts? The answer to that is not at the high school level. Keep in mind that at the interscholastic level for college football, or I should say, keep in mind at the college level, I serve on our National Federation Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, and I serve with several physicians that also take care of college teams. And it was relayed to me early on in this COVID crisis that in order to COVID test for a college football team, it could be $500,000 a year. In order to COVID test for a basketball team, it could be about $200,000 a year for a college basketball program to test for COVID. That's not possible at the high school level. So you are not going to see any specific sites or any specific testing programs set up specifically for student athletes within our association. And that goes throughout the country. I have close contact with all of my colleagues throughout the United States. And to my knowledge, no state is setting up a testing program like LSU, University of Alabama, Notre Dame is on a daily or weekly basis. Who will be required for taking athletes' temperatures before games, meets, and contests? That's going to be up to the school district. What the Department of Health has said is that each school district must have screening in place for student athletes, coaches, and vendors or officials. It does not require screening to be in place for spectators, although it is required. So who's going to be required for taking the temperature? That's completely up to the school district as far as how they abide by and meet the standards given to us by the New York State Department of Health when it comes to screening of student athletes. Will coaches be required to sanitize balls after each use? Another question on sanitation is sanitizing gymnastics equipment and floors. And then when will we be informed about the policies and sanitation of equipment? If you look within that document that I referenced at the beginning of this presentation, on page 18, we have an entire section on cleaning and disinfection of facilities and equipment. So make sure you're reading through this. If you're a coach, your athletic directors have already probably read through this document several times. If you're seeing this for the first time, read through it. It's a comprehensive document, but what we tried to do as the High School Athletic Association is take the most important bits and pieces of the Department of Health guidance and put it into a document that was organized specifically for coaches and athletic directors. So if you have questions about cleaning and disinfection or sanitation of equipment, reference page 18 of the resource document that we provided, and this will provide answers for those questions. Also, will we be receiving sport-specific guidelines soon? For track, will we be receiving event-specific guidelines? What we did in preparation for the fall season is we released what we refer to as individual sport considerations. Our national governing body, the NFHS, gave us some basic considerations for each sport. We have those already from the NFHS, and I'm actually meeting with our association staff tomorrow morning to start looking at the winter sport considerations. What we don't want to do is release winter sport considerations and say, here's how you can effectively play basketball, and here's what you should be thinking of for the sport of wrestling, or here's what you should be doing for indoor track, before the guidance is given to us by our state officials. Because what we don't want to do is add more confusion to our school districts, athletic directors, and coaches. By releasing information too early, before the guidance is given to us from state officials, it could be more problematic for our school districts. So that's the reason why, again, we're trying to be patient. And when we're given authorization, for whatever authorization that may be from our state officials, then you will see similar documents released by our office to our membership for the winter sports season, and then eventually for the spring sports season. But before we receive the guidance from state officials, we need to make sure that we're not releasing information that could be incorrect and could be problematic for our member schools. And this goes along with the next question. Cheerleading specific, will stunting be permitted during our competition season, or should we prepare for non-contact routines? And if you look at the slide that I referenced a few minutes ago on extracurricular activities that was included in the late August Department of Health guidance, it specifically says high-risk sports cannot have contact. And cheerleading has been determined to be a high-risk sport by the Department of Health. So as it stands right now, high-risk sports cannot have contact. They could do conditioning, but at no point in time should they have any contact as per the Department of Health guidance. And that stands until we receive any additional guidance from our state officials.
Dr. Zayas, can I interrupt 1 second?
Please.
Yes, just we had an important question come in, kind of a acknowledgement that lacrosse is designated as high risk, but boys lacrosse is one of the few sports that can mitigate their risk by amending the rules: no face-offs, alternate possession after a goal, and no body contact with quick whistles. And it's the only sport possibly that can do that. We can reduce it to a moderate risk, and I believe that was Jimmy, but mentioned that the NFHS is considering amending or changing those rules. And the other question we had was, how are current sections handling the current protocols on game days?
Yeah, Frank, I guess to answer the first question, when you look at a sport like lacrosse, boys lacrosse is the only high-risk sport that we traditionally play in the spring. Girls lacrosse is determined to be a moderate risk sport by the Department of Health, while boys lacrosse, because of the contact dynamic of the game, is determined to be high risk by the Department of Health. If and when we receive additional guidance, then that may give us an opportunity to go to state officials and start having discussions about how could we, as the High School Athletic Association, modify the rules of the game in order to further reduce the risk for student athletes participating. But when you start talking about a spring sport, again, I don't want to try to get too far out in front of this situation and make things more problematic than they already are. So when we're talking about spring sports, let's go ahead and determine whether winter sports are going to be able to start practicing, when that may be, and what parameters they're going to be able to practice and compete under before we start discussing the spring sports season. So the last question that we received pertaining to the winter season is swim protocols. How many swimmers can be in a lane? The Department of Health guidance does not stipulate how many swimmers can be in a lane. What the Department of Health guidance does say is that you must maintain social distance of at least 6 feet at all times, and you must limit the maximum size of people in the water to no more than 10. So with that being said, keep in mind, one of our sport considerations that we released in our resource document on page 33, we go through all of the bits and pieces about the sport of swimming within that document. But one of the other things that we're finding is local departments of health are also providing their own guidance. And in some regards, the local Department of Health is providing guidance that supersedes or is more restrictive than the Department of Health guidance that we're receiving from the state. So keep in mind that you need to, or your athletic directors and superintendents and principals need to be closely working with your Department of Health to determine whether there's additional restrictions placed upon interscholastic athletics, in this case, the sport of swimming. And you can see here, Onondaga County Department of Health has their own guidance that they've released to their schools in the Syracuse area pertaining to public swimming pools. Question, implications for event planning and crowd control. Key rules and regulations to implement at competition and site events. If you look again to reference our resource document, we have considerations for facilities on page 17. And what that says is the Department of Health has said that no more than 2 spectators per participant can be at a venue at any one time. And then it also states that indoor capacity is limited to no more than 50% of the maximum occupancy for a particular area. So when you're talking about how can we control the crowd, your athletic directors, school principals, and school superintendents are aware of this guidance. In some cases, it may not be advantageous to allow 2 spectators per participant within your venue. It may not be possible. In some cases, your local Department of Health may say, absolutely not, no participants. In some sections, they're limiting the spectators to only the home spectators. So any visiting team spectators are prohibited from attending those away games. So keep in mind that as this continues to develop, so too will the rules and parameters for which the schools are going to abide by. But right now, the Department of Health, when we talk about controlling the size of the crowd, has said no more than 2 spectators per participating athlete. What's the status of middle school sports? This is a real common question, and this one really hits home for me because I have an 8th grade daughter that was looking forward to participating in modified cross country this fall. Unfortunately, the school district that we have or that we live in as a family, they have said no modified athletics this fall. So therefore, I'm now the teammate and coach of my 8th grade daughter when it comes to running cross country, and she's running me into the ground 3 or 4 times a week. But this is an individual school district decision as to whether you're going to have middle school or modified athletics this fall. So school districts are making these decisions on a daily, weekly, and by-season basis. So if you're concerned about modified athletics, that is certainly a question to direct to the school district. This question was also asked, and I'm thinking that it pertains to the middle level athletics, meaning freshman JV. Again, those are individual school district decisions as far as what teams your school district will have the opportunity to offer based upon resources and COVID restrictions. Transportation was another common theme of the questions submitted to Frank during your registration process. Wanted to bring attention to the questions asked is, what's your recommendation for athletic transportation to and from events? What recommendations would you have with parent contact of athletes prior and after events? How might we handle the bus situation with getting players to contest? The New York State Education Department released a very comprehensive document, about 159 pages, I think. Within this comprehensive document, and if you just Google New York State Education Department reopening guidance, you'll find this document that is linked on the internet, and then you can go ahead and access all the information that SED has released specifically pertaining to transportation. Officials is another common theme that was asked during the questions submitted. When you look at officials, how should coaches approach officials for temperature checks and paperwork upon arrival? That's an individual school district decision. The Department of Health has said you must screen student athletes, coaches, and vendors, which would include officials. They do not, however, stipulate the mechanism, the screening mechanism that is to be utilized for the screening of students, coaches, or vendors or officials. So how that's conducted is completely up to the individual school districts. The second question, officials reporting to a game, what policies and procedures will they be responsible for upon arrival? And who's responsible for gathering this information? Again, school district decision. And the third question on this slide, Who's going to be responsible to screen all referees and officials that come to officiate a high school game? Same thing, almost the same question and same response. That's going to be an individual school district decision. The one thing that we have been stressing to officials is they are not the mask police. They should not be monitoring the sidelines to making sure that students are standing 6 feet apart in the bench area. They should not be the mask police, because keep in mind, the Department of Health has said when it comes to face coverings, and this has been a big topic that has been addressed throughout the last 7 weeks since the majority of the states started interscholastic athletics in some form or fashion, is what is the requirements for student athletes when it comes to face coverings. And the Department of Health has said within their guidance that if you must wear a face covering if you cannot maintain social distance of 6 feet. And the guidance goes on to read, unless the student cannot tolerate the face covering during physical activity. How do you determine toleration? How do you define toleration? That is going to be up to the school district working with your school medical director and your local Department of Health. That is certainly a topic that we as a high school athletic association are not going to provide a definition for toleration, nor are we going to require an official to ask students why they can or cannot tolerate a face covering during physical activity. When it comes to face coverings, that is a Department of Health guidance issue, and I strongly recommend working with your local Department of Health for any interpretation pertaining to the face covering issue. Now, within our resource document, we do have the DOH guidance, both guidance documents that we reference throughout this document. We've cited that on page 9 of our near 50 pages within our resource document. Now, when it comes to risk assessment and face coverings, as I just talked about, what type of protection will be required for football athletes and for wrestling. Again, the guidance from the Department of Health that I just referenced does say an acceptable face covering for COVID-19 includes, but are not limited to, cloth-based face coverings and disposable masks. Some local departments of health are saying you cannot wear a gaiter. Some local departments of health are providing permission and authorization to wear gaiters. So keep that in mind with the face covering. It's extremely important that school districts work with their local Department of Health to see if they have any additional guidance above and beyond the New York State Department of Health guidance.
Pardon me, Dr. Zayas, pardon me interrupting. We had a question about, do officials need to wear face coverings?
Yeah, that's a great question. Within this guidance that I just referenced on the previous page, it says, unless players are unable to tolerate the face covering. It does not reference adults or officials that are involved in physical activity. So I'm trying not to take any liberties with the Department of Health guidance because I don't work for the Department of Health. So what I've been saying is, if you're an official who is not able to tolerate a face covering while you're officiating, I strongly encourage you to work with your local Department of Health to get additional guidance on that issue. But right now, we are saying that officials should be wearing a face covering unless they're given additional guidance by their local Department of Health. Because that's what the Department of Health guidance stipulates.
Sorry, we also had one other question, Dr. Zayas. When you're dealing with a sport like winter track that isn't hosted by an individual school, individual school districts, do we defer to the host facility, or does our section determine the screening process for officials and athletes?
Yeah, I think that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, Frank, because when you're looking at the variation between facilities, school districts, and also the section, I think it's really important that everybody work together and those discussions are had prior to the event. I've encountered some very difficult discussions over the course of the last couple of weeks where a school district shows up for a game, a soccer game, for example. They get there and they realize the majority of the opposing team is not wearing a face covering because those student athletes have said they can't tolerate the face covering. And then when that school district steps off the bus, they have a lot of concern about playing a school district that's not wearing face coverings. And I've been continuing to stress that conversation should have been had 3 or 4 days prior to the game. It shouldn't be had as your student athletes are arriving on that school campus to determine that. If at any point in time a school district doesn't feel comfortable participating against another school, then that game should just be rescheduled and another opponent should be selected. But those are the types of discussions that need to be had well in advance of that game or contest.
Also, Dr. Zayas, a question: when hosting intramural or off-season workouts, are students required to have completed physicals and parent consent forms? And secondly, what is the rule for participation during the season as far as requirements for when the physical had to be received by the student athlete?
Yeah, as far as the physicals, if you're participating in a practice or a scrimmage, you should have a physical if it's an interscholastic participation. Now, during the fall season, the state education department provided a waiver for fall sport athletes that they did not need a new physical or an updated physical. For the winter sport athletes and what will be spring sport athletes, the state education department has not provided any waiver of that guidance, and all those student athletes should have an updated physical as they always have in previous years. So the last topic that I wanted to get to before I completely go over my time, because I want to make sure that I give plenty of time to our other guest speakers, is one of the questions is there's no reason why boys lacrosse is rated high risk while soccer and basketball are moderate risk. Wanted to use this question because basketball is actually determined to be a high risk sport. The high risk sports in the winter are basketball, ice hockey, wrestling, and competitive cheer. And then in the spring, the high-risk sport, as determined by the Department of Health, is boys lacrosse. And then, again, within our resource document, we reference the sport risk assessment conducted by the Department of Health. What data, if any, has been generated by the Catholic League's decision to play and the health and safety of players? And then what data, if any, has been generated from a district's decision to allow players to participate? We, as the High School Athletic Association, have not been gathering data pertaining to what has been successful and what hasn't. I have been asked an awful lot on social media, why am I not going and talking with the executive directors in New Jersey or Pennsylvania or other state high school athletic associations throughout the country and figuring out what they're doing? I am doing that. I'm talking with every other executive director in the Northeast. I have a meeting with them every Monday morning. I talk with colleagues of mine throughout the entire country. We're providing this information to state officials, to our membership, as we continue to address this situation. But as far as looking at what the Catholic High School Athletic Association has done and what they're doing, we have not done that because that doesn't pertain to what we're trying to accomplish. We're looking at how can we best provide participation opportunities for our student athletes with the guidance that were provided from our state officials. And our state officials are examining their own set of metrics and data points pertaining to the COVID crisis. And then just recently, the University of Wisconsin released a study on the spread of COVID-19 in high school sports. They found no correlation between interscholastic athletics and the spread of COVID-19. Just yesterday, the University of Wisconsin is now trying to collect national data. So some of you may have received a survey pertaining to University of Wisconsin's national data research study. Will there be specific doctors to report to? No, that is up to your school medical director when it comes to the COVID crisis. Your school medical director is in close contact with your local Department of Health. Another question, how do we get our athletes mentally ready to participate again? This is a struggle that every state in the country is dealing with right now, is kids are being negatively impacted, not just physically, but mentally. If at any point in time you see kids that are struggling, strongly encourage you to reach out to your school counselor, school medical director, and make sure you're alerting someone about any difficult times that a student athlete may be making you aware of as a coach. Has there been dialogue dealing with the potential lawsuits regarding COVID-19? Yes, there has been. We were just appeared in court on Friday in a class action lawsuit. Myself, the governor, and the head of the Department of Health were named in a class action lawsuit pertaining to the sport of football. We, as the High School Athletic Association, did receive a favorable decision in this case, but this is certainly something that we are dealing with as it pertains to the decisions that we are making as a state high school athletic association. With that being said, I am way over my time, Frank, and I apologize for not speaking quickly enough, but I wanted to try to get through all of those questions. I am certainly willing to stay on after our guest speakers, and I can answer additional questions as needed, but here's my contact information. I provide my cell phone number because I want people to use it. So don't feel bad about sending me a text message or giving me a call. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Certainly use my cell phone number, use my email address. I want to serve as a resource for our member schools in any way that I can. So with that being said, thank you so much, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon.
Dr. Zayas, that was a great job. The communication now of all the difficulties you're experiencing in trying to bring us back safely, it was much better understood today. I know all of us here today are really grateful for your time and the effort you put into organizing those questions too, because we had a lot of them. And thank you so much. We encourage all the guys, ladies here to reach out to you and have questions and still some good thoughts. I did want to mention to you about the social emotional learning part of and the negative impact this has had on our kids. At Oceanside and several other districts, we made an initiative to have connections between the coaches and the student athletes 2-3 times a week, and dealing with their academic recovery, their athletic recovery and individual training, and their recovery in the college process for recruiting and just for getting to college. And it's been very effective, and I think that's part of what you're alluding to, reaching out to these young people to keep them in, to bring them back with us and not lose them. So thank you for that. And I really want to thank Don Vulpis right now as we're going on. Don, you're doing a great job. Thanks so much for your help. And our first presenter in terms of sports medicine and prevention of injuries is Dr. Jeff Corben. Jeff has been working in Nassau County for over 30 years, been a tremendous supporter of Nassau County athletics, Section 8 football, and all of our sports. And he's been there for our young people. He has a degree, doctorate in physical therapy, but also has much experience with athletic training and kinesiology and this health sciences. And we'd just like to thank you, Jeff, for being with us today and for your sponsorship of so many things in Nassau County and being part of us and never, ever letting us down, always being available for our kids, our coaches, and their families. And so I'd like to introduce Jeff now is going to talk about considerations for preventing injuries and what we have to do to get kids ready individually. Jeff, let me take over. Jeff, you have your screen? Okay. All right. Yeah, we still didn't get it yet, Jeff. All right, Jeff, how about if we could, we're working that, we'll get George to come on.
Hold on.
Okay.
All right, just a little glitch in there. All right, can you see that now?
No, I can't see it. No, you got to share the screen again.
Yeah, I did it. Okay, hold on. Give me a second. All right, George, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, George. Okay, let me introduce Dr. Ackerman. Just going to flip a little bit. Dr. Ackerman is a tremendous supporter of Nassau County football, Nassau County athletics. And for the last 9 years, he's been working as an orthopedic surgeon out of Lenox Hill, but he has an office in Westbury. He works out of Winthrop and other hospitals. But most of all, I can just say that Dr. Ackerman is an ever-present figure for our athletes on our fields, in our playoffs, and he's the most kind and caring person, all of our student athletes and coaches, and his knowledge and expertise is just unbelievable, off the charts. And George, we appreciate you speaking today. I'd like to welcome you. You sign on there, you go all set, we can see you. Good.
Very good. Thank you, Coach, and thanks for everyone for joining and for inviting me to come into this talk. I think it's extremely important. What I'd like to talk about, and I'll try to be as brief as possible in the interest of time, is injury prevention in youth sports. This is important this year especially, but it really in every year going forward as we get closer back towards normal. It was Ben Franklin who coined the phrase, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." And I think today I'd like to spend a couple of minutes discussing ways that we can keep the athletes on the field and out of my office and other orthopedists' office across the county. So let's first discuss the scope of the problem. There are more than 7.3 million high school students that participate in organized sports here in America. And the CDC has reported that this leads to over 2 million injuries a year. That's 500,000 doctor's visits and 30,000 hospitalizations. So it's clear it's a huge problem nationwide and especially here locally. Over half of these injuries in both middle and high school level are due to overuse. Young athletes are specializing in sports at a very early age. And this leads to play throughout the year without any really rest period between seasons. And this insufficient rest, poor conditioning, and their immature and developing skeletons can really lead to overuse injuries. And it's something that we should really kind of focus on and work in ways to try to address. Unfortunately, these injuries can often have lasting effects. Many of the injuries in the developing athlete can lead to future issues as an adult, and they can contribute to degenerative diseases later in life, such as osteoarthritis. The psychological effects of youth sports should also not be overlooked. The Yellow Brick Treatment Program in Chicago recently surveyed 1,000 people across the country to get a sense of how rampant the pressure to succeed in youth sports really is. And 70% of their respondents reported that they dropped out of sports by age 13. And the primary reason for their dropping out was often that sports just weren't fun for them anymore. This was due to a number of issues and things vying for their time, such as after-school activities, schoolwork, but very often they were talking about coaches, parents, and friends providing pressure on them to succeed, and that leads to them just kind of giving up on it and moving on to other things in life. And these children really lose the benefit of exercise, the teamwork, and the healthy competition. So something I think we should all be aware of. So what are some ways that we can help this? Given the limited time, I tried to find three issues and 3 simple ways that we can really help here in Nassau County to try to prevent some of the common injuries that I see every day. I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about preventing ACL injuries, protecting overhead athletes, and finally discussing ways to combat early sports specialization. First, we'll start off with ACL injury prevention. The anterior cruciate ligament is critical for knee stability and is commonly injured in youth sports, such as soccer, basketball, football, gymnastics, and lacrosse. Most of these injuries are non-contact in nature, and female athletes are particularly at risk, with reported injury rates 4 to 8 times their male counterparts. Although there are many success stories of athletes returning to their greatness after ACL reconstruction, the reality is that approximately 20% of these athletes will often sustain another injury of some sort within the next 2 years. And approximately 79% of them will go on to develop knee arthritis later in life. So this is clearly a long-lasting issue, and not everyone just jumps right back onto the field. As a result, there have been many efforts to prevent ACL injuries. 2 commonly used programs include the Santa Monica PEP program and the FIFA 11 Plus program. Both of these programs focus on body mechanics, balance, landing drills, and core and hip strength. The FIFA 11 program was designed to be performed as a warm-up about 2 or 3 times a week prior to training. It takes about 20 minutes to complete. It consists of 3 parts: running exercises, strength and balance training, and finally running exercises at a higher speed with planting and cutting. Proper posture and control are crucial throughout the program. Are these programs effective? Well, a study in 2010 looked at the FIFA 11 Plus program and was found to be significantly able to reduce both overuse and acute injuries to both the knee and the ankle. So it certainly does work, and has been proven study after study. The key to any of these prevention programs is compliance. Compliance greater than 66% resulted in injury reduction rates of 82%. However, when this compliance rate dropped to less than 66%, the ACL injury reduction rate dropped to 44%. So it really only works if you do it. Another component of ACL prevention is identifying athletes at risk. One simple way that coaches and trainers can identify these athletes is to have them perform a drop test. This is something that can be done in person or remotely with the use of any phone camera. Now they have slow motion cameras, which can make it even more effective. You simply have to have an athlete drop down with both feet from a 1 to 2 foot height and land on both feet and perform a 2-legged jump with a soft landing. Things to look at in this maneuver include keeping a linear relationship between their hip, knee, and ankle without the knee buckling inwards into what we call a valgus position. Additionally, from the side, we should look at proper alignment with flexion at the hips and making sure that the knees do not extend beyond the toes. In this video, you can see that the athlete on the left first showing some knee buckling or dynamic valgus when she lands. And then after some intervention, you can see on the right, she's able to better control this. And this significantly protects her against ACL injuries, among other injuries that we can see to both the knee and the ankle. Some ways to help athletes to improve this function and form include hip and core strengthening exercises seen here. Most of these can be done with minimal equipment. They can be done at home. They can be done socially distanced on a field or in a gym, and something that athletic trainers and coaches should really be very familiar with, and working on generating hip and core strength for our young athletes, which is often overlooked. Now I'd like to take a couple minutes to discuss the arm care for the overhead athlete. One of the key things to remember, especially when treating throwers, are that kids are not little adults. They have developing musculoskeletal systems and puts them at greater risk. Studies have shown that the incidence of elbow pain in youth baseball players is between 20 and 30% for 8 to 12-year-olds. This goes up to 45% in 13 to 14-year-olds and over 50% for high school, college, and professional athletes. Elbow pain in the overhead athlete is sometimes a sign of an ulnar collateral ligament tear in the elbow, which is often treated surgically with what's commonly referred to as the Tommy John procedure. Over the past 20 years, there's been a 6-fold increase in the number of Tommy John procedures performed a year. One of the reasons for this increase is that there's a misconception that pitchers will often throw harder and their velocity will increase after the procedure. In reality, this is not true. Even at the professional level, only 80 to 83% of players return to the same level of performance. When you look at the high school level, this number drops to between 70 and 73%. So the best thing to do is to stay out of the operating room and work on your form and function. One of the most effective ways that we can help this is to have proper protocols in place. Athletes should really have a preseason training program with a 4 to 6 week interval throwing program. There should be at least 2 to 3 months a year without any overhead throwing whatsoever. And pitchers should really adhere to local pitch count rules based on their league and level of play, and really avoid playing both pitcher and catcher, because the catcher is going to often throw even more than a pitcher in a game. You can't prevent throwing injuries unless you have good pitching mechanics. And without proper hip and core strength and the ability to balance on one leg, you can't really have good pitching mechanics. So for this reason, lower body strengthening, as we discussed previously, is very important for throwers. A simple way that we can also help to identify some athletes at risk is to have them perform a sleeper stretch. Throwers often externally rotate their arm repeatedly when throwing, and this often leads to an increase in their external rotation and a decrease of their internal rotation. This can cause a problem called GERD, or glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. This stretch, often performed daily by any thrower or overhead athlete, such as a volleyball player, is a simple way to prevent this loss of internal rotation and protects both their shoulder and elbow from injury. Finally, I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes discussing early sports specialization. Early sports specialization is defined as participation in one sport by a child under the age of 12 for more than 3 seasons a year without any other sports at the same time. And I understand this is a high school talk, but a lot of us have children or coach other leagues, and it's important to kind of relay some of these tips to the other coaches and to our kids. Although physical activity is beneficial for your overall health, sports specialization can lead to the increase of injury, burnout, decrease of enjoyment due to excessive training. It can also decrease the athlete's ability to cross-train and gain physical benefits from other sports. The American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine launched a one-sport campaign to help to address and prevent these one-sport overuse injuries. Kids who specialize early are more likely to develop overuse injuries because of the repetitive movements and the decrease in rest, and this leads to them to ultimately quit sports, which we all know are very important for their development. This has been tested multiple times in study after study in a variety of journals to see what's the effect of early sports specialization. A study in pediatrics published last year looked at 5,600 athletes under the age of 18. Those athletes that were deemed to have high specialization were found to have an overuse injury risk of 81% compared to athletes with lower specialization. Even moderate sports specialization was found to have a greater risk than low sports specialization. Back in 2015, a study in the American Journal of Sports Medicine looked at 1,200 students aged 7 to 18. Athletes that were older tended to have more sports injuries, including those that had more total hours of physical activity. When you start to account for age and hours of sports activity, sports specialization was found to be an independent risk factor. Young athletes that were participating in more hours of sport per week than their number of age and years had an increased odds ratio of serious sports injury. And this has led to the overall advice of limiting one particular sport to the hours per week of their age. So if you have a 12-year-old girl, she should really not play soccer for more than 12 hours in a given week. It's fine if she plays other sports, but really try to limit it to their age in hours per week. The other thing to consider is that these these studies don't even consider their impact in their mental health. When a student athlete is injured, they're not able to play with their friends. It can lead to overall stress and depression and many other injuries that are really not the scope of this talk, but very important to consider going forward, especially in this time. So some one-sport injury prevention tips include getting preseason wellness checks and physicals to address health concerns that may lead to overuse injuries, making sure that athletes always properly warm up and cool down, incorporating strengthening and stretching as we've previously discussed, hydration and proper nutrition, moving athletes from one position to another or to have them mix up the different sports throughout the year to minimize overuse injuries. And then really speaking to your athlete to see how they're feeling. Many young athletes are not going to tell you that they're hurt or that their knee's bothering them. You really have to try to elicit it from them and take the necessary actions. If you go to stopsportsinjuries.org, there's some great educational materials for coaches and trainers based on their various sports, good things to hand out to parents and to athletes. This year certainly has created some new challenges for us. We had a prolonged period of inactivity. We're going to have some shortened preseasons for conditioning, condensed seasons with limited rest periods between the seasons, and some protocols at various schools and towns that may limit their ability to train for a certain amount of time or access to equipment. It's something that we're all going to have to adjust, but we should keep these considerations in mind. So in summary, we can work on landing mechanics and core strengthening with the hip strengthening to prevent ACL injuries, proper protocols and mechanics with the sleeper stretch for arm care for the overhead athlete. And we should really educate our athletes to avoid early sports specialization. As a doctor, I can certainly treat these injuries, but it's up to the parents and coaches to help us prevent them. And I really thank you guys in this effort because it's extremely important moving forward. This is my contact information, including my cell phone, email. Please feel free at any time to reach out to me if you have any questions about this talk, ways that I can help out in terms of helping your young athletes. If there's anyone at risk, we can certainly get them into a training program to prevent any invasive treatments. Thanks.
George, thank you so much. That was a great job. And George, if you could also, could you put your phone number in the chat box? Dr. Zayas did that, and that can help us. But I want to thank you so much, George. But I failed to mention before that Dr. Ackerman is a graduate of Seaford High School. His undergraduate work he did at Cornell University, and he attended New York Medical College, and he did a residency at Corben University, St. Luke's Hospital. And then he's continued his work to serve Long Island, where he came from, and we could see his commitment and passion for our young people in his practice in Westbury, and also being available whenever our guys and girls need help. We thank you so much, George. Our next presenter, it's kind of important to mention that Dr. Jeff Corben has been involved in Nassau County athletics for over 30 years. And Jeff himself also is a graduate of Sachem High School, and he did his undergraduate work at Cortland State, biochemistry, kinesiology, concentration in medical athletic training. And he has his master's degree in physical therapy from Touro College and his doctorate from Northeastern University. He's extremely knowledgeable. He has the greatest expertise in sports medicine and injuries and rehabilitation. He's been a mentor to so many high school coaches in Nassau County, all over Long Island. And the thing about Jeff is that there's no one who has a better heart and cares more about young people and their families than Dr. Jeff Corben. Nassau County is very blessed. All the ways he supports us. I could go on to tell you so many things he does, from our clinic to sponsoring opportunities for young people, and just a showcase, which is coming up shortly, to help kids be recruited for college. And so I'm very grateful to introduce to you Dr. Jeff Corben. Jeff?
All right, thanks, Coach. Let's just make sure I can figure out this screen here. Can you see my screen now, Coach?
Yes, it's there. Okay.
Thank the good Lord. All right. All right, we're good, Coach?
You're good, Jeff. You're great, Jeff.
Good. Thanks, Coach. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody hanging in there. Sorry I screwed that up. I was just so riveted by what Dr. Zayas was talking about. I kind of lost my mind a little bit. But let's talk about the first step in returning to athletics. And, you know, it all begins with the off-season conditioning program, really what we call the off-season injury prevention program. So right here, this slide shows the pre-participation physical exam, the components of the pre-participation physical exam. As with any exercise regimen, we would recommend any athlete, any person, first begin with a physical examination by their physician, especially after being off so long, and we have an 8-month layoff. It's even more important to identify some issues, dormant issues, possibly something came up. You know, there is some sort of bug or a virus out there, so maybe just to get checked up is a good idea. And for some parents and athletes, July, August, September is a good reminder to get a physical exam, check up on their vaccinations. Now, we know that this is not a normal year. Dr. Zayas spoke about the COVID testing in the high schools, you know, the expense. Totally understood. You know, maybe this is something that we need to revisit down the road. It can be part of a physical exam in the future. There is always some controversy with that. Sample of time, the test is done, the availability, state mandates. But regardless, the controversy, what I would recommend, I know what I would do for my child is if any child, young athlete tested positive, they should also receive a cardiac workup. So I just learned yesterday that the definition of now what we're calling off-season is now defined as now, where we are now, to January 3rd. This is for the winter season, really for the January, February sports. Preseason is defined as that start date, so which would be January 3rd, to the date of the first competition. So we need to now be concerned about our athletes' physical, psychological, and emotional status. The biggest issue that I'm finding is a lot of these athletes are really concerned about this 8-week season. Again, you know, we're just trying to get them time and really trying to get back to playing sports. That's something that's weighing heavily on their heads, as well as the ability to be excellent now, not to have to wait. The season goes on, I got to get better, better, and better, but to be excellent now. And they also are concerned with that looming possibility that athletics will be shut down at any time. Other things that we need to be concerned about is the acclimation process, the weather. So now you're going to take an athlete who's used to being training and conditioning in the fall athletes who used to conditioning in the summer in shorts and t-shirts and whatever. Now they have to acclimate in the wintertime to be ready for their sport, what they call fall 2. So that's something that's a little concerning we have to pay attention to as well as training and conditioning them in different climates for competition. So yeah, we are behind schedule with our off season for January and February, but we need to get back on schedule. We know we spoke about the mental component a little while ago, which I call the brain game. It's a powerful tool, and we have to start to talk to our athletes about that, getting them their head into playing sports and competing again, that whole mind body back to sports. So the off-season conditioning injuries, some of what Dr. Ackerman spoke about. In my mind, a long time layoff means a short time to become prepared. And we do see injuries not only to the ligament structure that Dr. Ackerman mentioned, but in the off-season conditioning, injuries to the muscle contractile tissue, which is the strains to the muscles, tendinitises, whether they're acute or chronic. The growth-related conditions we see, the Osgood Schlatter's tends to act up, chondromalacia to patella, which is a weakening of the cartilage behind the kneecap. Also, different types of imbalances that we see in the off-season due to training. So in a typical 2019 and past years, a growth-related injury was when these young stud athletes, where their athletic performance has surpassed their physical development, meaning that their bodies are not prepared for the imposed demands on them. But in 2020, so now we're asking these athletes for the same demands to be placed on their bodies, but they're not ready. Their bodies aren't ready for it. So this is why we need to be on this conditioning program sooner than later. It should have been done already. Also, the cognitive approach to this, like we just spoke about the brain game, the mental aspect, Mental reps, mental training is going to go a long way. Any upper-level athlete will tell you mental reps is free practice. So some of these athletes are, as most of you spoke to some athletes, they're checked out already. They're not here yet. And some are just thinking that, look, they're going to be home just chilling, and just being home chilling and showing up for day one of your sport is a recipe for an injury. So the off-season prevention program has different components. The first component is stretching. So no activity means loss of range of motion. Loss of range of motion means loss of range of motion around the joint. Another ingredient for an injury. So what we recommend is some common types of stretching, the static and dynamic stretching. The static stretching is the holding of the muscle at its end range. Try to hold it for like 30 seconds. There's a lot of good research out there that says hold it for 30 seconds helps with more extensibility of the muscle, as well as dynamic stretching, which is a gradual controlled movement through the full range of motion. For example, arm circles or leg swings. The next component would be balance. So balance is very, very important, and that also helps with agility and power. So balance is the ability to have coordinated movements of your body. So a perfect example of this is a single leg stand, standing on one leg on level surfaces, and then kind of taxing the system a little bit more, standing on uneven surfaces, whether it's grass, grassy surfaces or sand. Then you can have them stand on inclines, facing down an incline, up an incline, perpendicular to the incline. Then once that's mastered, you can go over to like a Bosu ball, which is one of those half-round plyo balls. Try to balance on there, and tax yourself a little bit even more, closing your eyes, doing the same what I just spoke about with your eyes closed. And then once that's mastered, another upper-level complex motion to that would be like a single-leg squat, or squat trying to pick up a cone. Another good idea is for the athletes, if they have access to lacrosse players, standing on one leg, play wall ball, or having a catch on one leg, foul shots on one leg, really trying to stress the neuromuscular system. So agility is the next component, and with the agility, there are tons and tons of drills. Agility is quickness, and what we really want to work here is change of direction and change of speed. With agility, I would urge all of you to incorporate backpedaling, very, very good research in backpedaling and agilities. A lot of the drills that we see can involve some simple to complex activities. The agility ladder seems to be a crowd pleaser, and a lot of the athletes like that, which is fantastic. It's a good piece of equipment. You can use it on the field, your hash marks. Another simple one is the agility square, where you'll sprint, let's say 10 yards, shuffle to your left 10 yards, backpedal 10 yards, and karaoke to where you started from, another 10 yards. You can increase the distance, decrease the distance, increase your speed, start at 50%, progress to 100%. And that seems to be something that there are so many variations on that. You can develop the square into a parallelogram or what have you. There's a lot you can do with that. The next portion is the strengthening component of an off-season prevention program. Here, I would urge you to consider the athlete's physical development. Some of these skeletally immature athletes, we don't want to start adding a lot of weight, a lot of resistance to what they're doing. Here, we want to work more reps, and there's certainly some things we could do for that. We know that strength is the capacity to move a resistance. It also helps with protection of the skeletal system, also improves athletic mechanical efficiency. So for right now, where we are, I typically like to train athletes as athletes. Where we are right now, we have to kind of think ahead. So a wrestler should not be strength trained the same as a basketball player. So that's something we need to keep in mind. For the winter, January, February athletes, we need to work, because it's time component now, we need to work on big muscle groups, the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, the back, the shoulders. We can also add weighted balls or medicine ball type exercises in because that moves us to the complex movements, add cleans and deadlifts. But above all, with all of what we're talking about, has to be excellent technique. You cannot move forward, add resistance unless your technique is excellent. cardiovascular training is a huge component with off-season prevention program. And this needs to be done in a progression. Typically, what we like to look at here is about 30 minutes of continuous activity. Question is now, how and where do we do this? Knowing that the indoor facilities are going to be very, very limited. We can work this outside, jogging, or working on a field, depending on weather. Also, we can do this in a gym if the athlete belongs to some sort of a gym. The idea is to get the heart rate up and train in the desired target heart zone. Something we need to revisit with our athletes is to drink water. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Copious amounts of water. We also need to instill in them healthy food choices now more than ever. If all else fails, or really, forget that, I think a starting point needs to be to tell them avoid prepackaged foods and high-fat foods. All right? Again, really, really important that we address this because we don't know what they've been doing. We don't know what they've been doing for the last several months. So here's my takeaway. I know that we all need to have a takeaway with any presentation. These are the components of an off-season prevention program. If we address these, we'll be on the way to getting us back to competing. There's much more to discuss. We can make this happen. We can get back to athletics. I know we have the technology. I've been talking to a lot of people, a lot of coaches from here around the country. We here in New York, we have the technology and certainly the personnel to do it. We need to communicate with our athletes, though. I learned yesterday there are some schools that have prohibited their coaches from talking to their athletes, even to now. That's just wrong. That's just wrong. Coaches need to communicate with their athletes. It's crucial right now. Nothing's changed. Let's continue to wash your hands, wear a mask, watch your distance, be smart and be safe. We need to have a little forethought, and that will go a long way. So let's just begin a systematic, progressive approach to our return to play. Let's be smart and be safe. Coach, sorry about my glitch in the beginning. Thank you for your time.
Great job, Jeff. That was really, really tremendous. And stuff that student athletes can take individually if they're not allowed to work as a group, and they can work really, really well at this. And they can also contact you. Jeff, if you could put in the chat bar your information, again, contact information, so guys can see that, all right? And then, we also, Jeff alluded to this point about there are studies coming out. Pat Pizzarelli and Dom have mentioned this, that we don't know everything about this disease yet. And there are studies which have serious concerns for students who've had the COVID and been infected, that there could be a serious tragedy with them because their cardiac system being compromised. So really we want to watch out for kids and encourage them to get that cardiac screening. And the other part is now to work with a plan. You've kind of heard ideas. We want to work to meet with our sports coordinators. They're all going to get a copy of this recording, to meet with your sports coordinator on a Zoom and come up with some suggestions and important points that you think could be solutions to the way you handle the rest of the off season, the preseason, and the actual season. Our goal is to get ready. We don't know for sure that it's going to come off, but we got to be ready to play. As Jim Amon had said to me the other day, we don't know for sure what's going to be the end point. But we got to be ready, get them ready, and connect to them so we can help them prepare. Connect to them not only athletically, but also preparing them to do their best work now in high school, their grades, their achievements, and also to prepare because college is around the corner for them soon. I thought if we have a couple of minutes, if anyone has some questions you'd like to pose, Greg, Sarah, and also Kevin, if you have something from your end, from the media you'd like to pose, I think, Dom, we could unmute someone, right, I think, if they wanted to speak.
They can unmute themselves. And Roger Rubin's also on from Newsday.
Yeah, Roger has some questions, Frank. Roger would like to ask you guys a couple questions.
Go ahead,
We
Roger.
go back and forth, texting each other, and we have some questions that we pooled that Roger would like to ask.
Go ahead, Roger. Thanks so much for being with us, Roger. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for inviting us. I basically see 3 lines of questions that I have here. I'm going to start with the simplest one. and this is probably for Dr. Zayas. With the fall sports season, because of the time off, the mandated number of practices before a team could do a scrimmage or a competition was extended from, I'm going to say, 6 to 10. Are you anticipating doing something like that as well for the winter sports?
Great question, Roger. No, and the reason why is that student athletes will have been taking physical education by the time that they start the winter sports season, and we will know that they've been able to participate in some form of physical activity. While in preparation for the fall sports season, there was some concern about students that didn't do a lot of physical activity during the extended layoff.
Okay, thank you. The second line of questions is, and it got touched on just in the last, 4 or 5 minutes. The NCAA in recent weeks has added into its health protocols for athletes who are returning from a positive test a component of cardiac testing, because there are some indications that COVID has impact on the heart. How will the state deal with, A, the category of player who had COVID at some time prior to the sports season, and how will they deal with the heart issue if somebody tests positive during the winter sports season and can come back?
Yeah, another great question. I think there's always an attempt to compare interscholastic athletics to what is taking place at the NCAA level or even the professional level. When it comes to a student athlete that has had an extended layoff, what our handbook states is that a student that has had an extended layoff, the school medical director should be involved in how they return to play. So that's included within our handbook under health examinations. And that's what we rely upon as an interscholastic athletic association, is the school medical director examining that student, examining the amount of time that they were laid off, and how that student can appropriately return to play.
So in terms of those health assessments that are done, physicals or whatever, if it was a person who had been positive for COVID, the cardiac stuff would take place during that physical before the season?
That's going to be completely up to the school medical director. We have 2 physicians on the line with us today. As my daughter will tell you, I'm not the kind of doctor that helps anyone. I have a PhD in sports administration, so I leave that up to our school medical directors and the school physicians and our medical doctors to determine what test a student athlete should undergo when they return from an extended layoff, whether it be an injury or a COVID illness.
Well, don't play yourself down. You're helping plenty of people, doctor. And the last thing, and I think this is probably going to be most interesting to all of the other people on the call here. You said that you have not been in touch with the people involved with parochial school sports that are being conducted, but you have talked to people from other states, including New Jersey, about what is happening with them conducting interscholastic athletics and the virus being, spread or whatever. I mean, what have you learned?
Well, I just think that every state has a different set of metrics that their state officials are examining. For some of my colleagues, they are receiving different information from their Department of Health. And you can really almost compare it to when we have children that say, well, why can my friends go to the mall and I'm not allowed to go to the mall? Well, I'm not your friend's parents. And I think our state officials could probably say that in the same regard, is they're not in charge of people in other states. Our state officials are looking at metrics and they're examining data points using the information that they have in New York State. And I think we have to be respectful of the fact that we have some of the lowest infection rates in the entire country because of the diligent work of our state officials. So we have to take the good and the bad. And we can't say that the delay in getting interscholastic athletics is all bad, because I think it has done a wonderful job of lowering that infection rate, drastically reducing hospitalizations, really putting New Yorkers in a much better position than many other states throughout the country.
So based on that answer, It sounds to me like the state education department, Department of Health, again, governor, is going to make decisions maybe without something instructive coming from New Jersey and what they've been doing this fall. Is it not going to inform the way that New York State makes decisions?
Yeah, again, that's not any type of question that I would be in a position to answer because I'm not the one making those decisions. Our state officials are looking at their own set of metrics and they're examining their own data points. I'm not aware of how those decisions are being made or what other states they are examining, but I can tell you right now I have the utmost confidence that if and when we get the opportunity to play, it'll be done in a safe manner with the focus of risk minimization for our student athletes as our focus.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sure.
Kevin, Mark, Kevin, did you have anything you, yeah, I'm sure you did.
Yeah, just a few follow-ups. The term, Dr. Zayas, I keep hearing saying this state officials. It's a really broad. Can you narrow that down specifically? You mentioned you talked to other colleagues in different states, and then I gather that information and I give it to state officials. Who are these state officials that you are reporting to?
So we have representatives from the Department of Health that served on our COVID task force. We're also in communication with the governor's office. I also have contacts at the state education department that we talk to. So it's not just one singular person, but groups of individuals that we're constantly in communication with, as we've been in communication for the last 7 months. And I think that's important for everybody to understand. You're not going to go on my Twitter account and see a play-by-play of what we're doing on a daily basis. That's not our advocacy efforts that we are doing at this point in time. We are communicating with the appropriate people, and we're doing it to ensure that we're giving student athletes the best opportunity to play when it's safe and it's appropriate.
It's great, and I've been on those governor conference calls where people can ask him questions, and he's pretty honest, and the state budget director answers questions. It seems weird, though, that he's willing to tell us certain things, but when you're maybe looking for answers from him, are you getting him? Are you happy with the level of communication that you've gotten from him?
Yeah, I'm happy with the level of communication we're getting from his office and from the Department of Health and the State Education Department. And as I mentioned during my presentation, there's a hierarchy of need. And for anybody that thinks that we should put interscholastic athletics above hospitalizations or above lowering the infection rate, I'm not sure that they have their priorities in the correct order. So when we're looking at where we fall, as the executive director of the State High School Athletic Association, I consider the responsibility of 600,000 student athletes in 800 schools to be paramount, but I also understand that our state officials have a great level of responsibility, that they have all New Yorkers that they have to focus on, and we're respectful of that.
Another question about these conference calls with the governor. Like I said, I've been on them. He defers to, I believe it's the state budget director, to answer questions. Why is that?
Again,
in regards to high school athletics, I just don't understand why he defers to the state budget director. Do you know?
I would have no way of commenting on that, Kevin.
Okay. And I guess for Pat and Dom, I know Dr. Zayas says he hasn't conferred with the Catholic League. I'm just wondering if Nassau County officials have, conferred with Ralph and everybody on the Catholic League here on Long Island about things that they're doing that might give you an idea of what Nassau County has to do going forward.
Well, I can tell you.
Why don't you take that, Dom?
Yep, I've spoken to Ralph, and the fact is that we're following all of Robert's guidelines right now because sports that are in effect are the fall sports. And nobody's beginning any other sports because, like we said, we're waiting for that guidance to happen. So, you do what you can whenever the clearance or the guidance comes down, and that's what we're all doing.
If I could add to that, Kevin, if I could add to that, I think Dom brings up a very good point. I would be willing to bet that the Catholic Association and the Independent School Association, and even to some extent the PSAL in New York City, have utilized the resource document that we produced. We took both the State Department of Health guidance. We also took information from our national governing body to put that resource document together. So I would think that if you ask the Catholic Association, they probably have examined our document in an effort to give their student an opportunity to play, just like 7 other sections throughout the state have done. And again, Nassau, section 11, in Suffolk, They had a very difficult decision that their leadership made when it came to when can interscholastic athletics begin. And under their leadership, it's going to begin at some point. Right now, the date is January 4th. But again, utmost confidence in the leadership of Section 8 and the job that they're doing to provide their student athletes with the best opportunity to participate.
Kevin, I just want to continue what Robert just said, because that is the key component, is that others are looking at the lead of Robert's office. The Catholics particularly used their state association to confer with the guidances that were brought down by Robert, and they abided by all of those that are being followed right now. So it really does come, you know, in the fact that nobody wants to hang out there by itself. The legal suit that just came about with football, okay, and Robert could speak better to that because he was, you know, firsthand on it. But I could tell you from, as the Catholics were named in that suit, they went with Robert's office representing. It really does come from, you know, our state association, who has done a marvelous job with this.
I guess for Dom and Pat, in terms of the upcoming winter track season, I know most of the meets tend to take place at St. Anthony's. Has there been communication about would public schools be allowed to use St. Anthony's facilities?
St. Anthony has reserved dates. St. Anthony's has reserved dates for us at this point. I don't think a final decision has been made, but we are proceeding forward, and we are putting a schedule in, and we're hopefully going to get St. Anthony's and run meets. They'll probably won't be quite as crowded, not quite as many teams at one time, but we hope to have a nice winter track season.
Excellent. And I guess
Dr. Zayas, I have a question for you.
I got one last one, and then I'll let Greg go if you don't mind. Dr. Zayas, how concerned are you right now that with a lot of these sections down here, well, both of them, Nassau and Suffolk, that they're going to try to restart sports with in the winter season when most of the sports are these high-risk sports?
Well, I think that's going to be dependent upon the guidance that we receive from state officials. And I think that we have to wait, and we have to wait and see what guidance we're going to receive, just like we waited for guidance on the fall season. So once we're provided that guidance, I met with my staff this morning, and we're prepared to work around the clock if need be to provide updates and those individual sport considerations to make sure that everybody fully understands and can fully comprehend what we're going to be able to do, how we're going to be able to do it, and make sure that students are safe when participating.
Okay. All right, Greg, go.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
Dr. Zayas, curious, why talk to other states if their info isn't going to be considered? If you're gathering information, if it's not relevant, why bother?
Well, I mean, I think I, as the executive director, should at least be aware of what's going on in other parts of the country. It might give us the opportunity when we're communicating with state officials to be able to let them know what could be taking place in other states throughout the country. Some of these executive directors I've known for almost 20 years. I have a great relationship with them and have the ability to ask them how things are going. And they do the same exact thing for me. I oftentimes have executive directors calling me asking, how are you handling this type of situation? How are you addressing the class action lawsuit that we were just in? How are you handling different types of situations, whether it be face coverings, screening, spectators? So it's constant dialogue that I'm having with other state executive directors throughout the country.
Thank you. Pat, question for you.
Yeah.
With the Catholic League, I know everybody is looking at the Catholic League, and I get a lot of mail and a lot of social media comments in regard to how does the Catholic League pull this off and play their sports, and Nassau and Suffolk County can't do that? My question there is, and now I've lived it for the last 5 weeks, is the Catholic League, it has not been as smooth as you might think. There's been a daily barrage of schedule changes. It is nonstop. They do not stick to the schedule. They move games constantly because of all the challenges of busing, safety requirements, weather. It's been an unbelievably difficult ride with the Catholic League. It has not been easy. When you look at what's going on in the Catholic League and all the challenges that they've had in the last 5 weeks, does it make you think that, you know what, this is what we would have expected? You have a couple of positive cases, you got to shut down the whole schedule, you got to keep kids quarantined. These are all the challenges that you and I talked about that they're seeing, that they're going through.
Well, if you read your own paper, Greg, every day more schools close because there are positive cases.
Right.
And, you know, it takes one athlete to visit another school. He can spread it to a whole nother school then. You know, so our athletic council, you know, out of abundance of caution, a new term that we all learned back in March, right? Abundance of caution. We decided not to have sports this fall. We're hoping like hell to get started in January. And whether or not we have only, you know, low and moderate risk sports or all sports, which I'm hoping for, we're going to play and we're going to have to juggle our schedules and follow the protocols and do the best we can. I think we all know we got to get kids playing again. I believe that. I think everyone on this call probably believes that, but we have to do it safely.
Dr. Zayas, I have a question for you in regard to football. So the Catholic League put together a football season, but it's not really flag football. They don't use flags to reduce contact. They play touch football, but they call it flag football. Does that work for the public schools moving forward if the Catholic school gets through the season with no issues, going with a touch football season at some point if tackle football is too high risk?
Well, I think, Greg, that would be a discussion that we would have with our membership. I continue to stress that we are a membership-led organization with about 800 high schools. So if that's an interest of our membership, then that's certainly something that we could consider. I continue to stress that we need to be flexible and we need to be willing to pivot and revise in the best interest of student athletes that we work on behalf of every single day. So if there's consideration for rule changes, as we discussed, potentially in the sport of boys lacrosse, if there's consideration for modifications to a certain sport like the sport of football, then I think we should consider all aspects of what we do moving forward. We have never experienced anything like this. And I think if we say this is the way it's going to be, we're ultimately going to have a hard time making decisions that are in the best interest for those students that we represent. If we say this is the way we would like it to be, and we're willing to make decisions right now based upon the readily available information, but with the caveat that we're willing to revise and we're willing to consider changes because of the unprecedented and uncertain times that we're experiencing, again, I think we're going to be making great decisions that we can hopefully help us move forward and maximize participation opportunities for those students.
Thank you.
Jimmy Ammon, Jim, why don't you go on? You had a question, Jim?
Yeah, I don't really have a question. I have a statement. So, Robert, thank you. Patrick, thank you. Frank, thank you. George and Jeff, thank you. So, you know, I think some of the problem is this. We don't have a lot of transparency. That's one thing. So when I ask Robert, who is on the Department of Health, who's making the decisions for low risk, moderate risk, high risk, I would love to know who those people are and do they have a background in athletics? And listen, I don't take the COVID-19 lightly, not at all. The second thing, it's so, and I understand what Section 8 did. I understand what we did with fall sports. I understand that. When you look at the other states in the country that have higher infection rate and they are operating some type of sports, it's, to me, mind-boggling, contradictory, okay? So when I open up, as Greg was talking about before, I open up Sunday Newsday, I see a boys soccer picture, no mask. I see a girls soccer picture, no mask. I see a swimmer swimming. And then I say to myself, why? You know, why couldn't we at least try it, okay? Then I read the newspaper or read an article that the state of Illinois said, screw the governor, we're having basketball. We're playing 31 games, you know, and I spoke to Robert about that, and he said, you know, hey, there are other states that are, you know, playing sports also, and we're not. And I understand we're governed by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, the Department of Health, all of those. My last rant here is this. So we're waiting for winter guidance from Governor Cuomo before we can move forward. What the hell is taking so long? What's so difficult about Governor Cuomo saying now, hey, we're not having basketball. We're not having wrestling. We're not having this, right? Last statement.
The election, Jim.
How are we going to play basketball? It's high risk. How are you going to change? You're going to tell a kid he can't guard somebody? You can't going to tell somebody you can't block out? How are you going to wrestle? You can't. So a sport like lacrosse, which I know a little bit about, if the National Federation would amend the rules, and they might because there's discussion. I'm not so concerned that I understand why you're waiting for winter guidance, but they could change the rules now so that later on we have spring guidance, and it's a lot easier. I could talk for a long time. I'm finished now.
Pat, did you have some thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, first of all, I need to thank Frank and Dom for all your work with this, and speakers, Robert, George, and Jeff. Thank you so much for your time. The information was so excellently done. If you guys could send, I don't know, Frank, do you have their PowerPoints? If you can get them, this way we can make those available to our people also. That would be really helpful to us. Every AD, Robert, has your documents because I sent it to them as soon as you sent it to me, which I do. But, I think today was a great day for the people that was on the call. I think people heard a lot of good stuff. And let's just hope that we get going come January 4th. And let's hope that we can play all sports. That's my hope anyhow. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Dom, did you have something you wanted to add, Dom?
Frank, I just want to thank you. You're the mastermind behind this. I know that we've had many a talk, and times when you feel like the world is coming down, because it's not the norm. You always turn toward prayer, and I want to thank you for that because it keeps us all going here. No matter what our jobs, no matter what our ability to reach others, we all know one thing. Everybody on this Zoom today has one common cause, and that's the good of kids. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, Dom, so much. And Dr. Zayas, Jeff, Dr. Ackerman, I want to thank you so much for your work. And Pat, thank you again. But Roger and Greg, thank you so much for coming. And Kevin, it's so great to see you guys. You're always looking to accent the positive, the three of you. And we're also grateful for your support and your work with Nassau County Athletics and for the young people. And so, guys, I can't thank you enough again. If you need, you go to the Section 8 website on Thursday. We should have this whole recording there. We'll also put up the PowerPoint presentations for all the speakers. And if you have any problems, contact me at Oceanside. I'll get right back to you. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, Dom. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks.
Dr. Zayas, thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jeff.
guys.
Pat.
Thank you. I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, guys. Greg, great job. Thank you, Kevin. Roger, great job.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, man.
Frank,